walking into a Toys R Us in 1982. I saw a skeleton-faced man that terrified me with a cool-ass ram-looking staff and a sword, or one half of a sword, and I was in love. This is why we had to separate the He-Man heroes from the He-Man villains. It would be no contest. The villains are better. They are cooler. They would win. And that's why I think in a ranking, we had to separate them, right? If you want to check out my He-Man heroes video, is right here. But now we're here. We're talking about the villains. But anytime I do a ranking, I feel like it's a good way to get a really cool and fun tour of some aspect of a toy line that spans from its worst aspects to its best aspects. And that is what makes that thing so fun. So here we are ranking the villains of Eternia. Well, of course, this ranking is going to be my opinion and only my opinion. I do feel it's like an educated opinion, as I know something. You might know more, and therefore tell me where I'm wrong in the comments below. I always like continuing these discussions. But I'm going to lay out some criteria here for what I think makes a really good He-Man villain, right? And what I think makes a great character in the Masters of the Universe, we talked about this in the Heroes video as well, is one, how well does it fit in that darker version of He-Man that we saw in the mini comic that was hinted at in the Frank Frazetta style art that lies more with the sort of Conan, Robert E. Howard version, weird fantasy, like hack and slash, sword and sorcery He-Man, than it does with the very goofy cartoon that I do love. So I'm not taking any shots at the cartoon for being too goofy. All of our beloved franchises had a dumbass, goofy ass cartoon to go along with them. But I think even the standards of goofy cartoons, He-Man was like one of the goofiest.
Skeletor to King Randor. Come in, you royal boob.
Still loved it. So not taking a shot, I'm just saying it's pretty goofy. And what I think makes a character stand out in the He-Man lore is, one, how good is his design? Second, what is the special feature? The creators of He-Man were incredibly innovative and interesting and experimental with all these different special features. That made the line so fun. I think it's what makes the line stand out so well. Beyond that, though, I'm going to consider, where does this character fit in the lore? And how well does it work in that darker version? And one of the things that makes a character not work in the darker version is it has a dumbass name, which a lot of He-Man characters have dumbass names. Their naming weren't the best at naming. They needed somebody else to come in, step in, and give some names. Everybody's an or. Now, there are a lot of these damn characters. There are much more, there are more villains than there are heroes, showing that the people at Mattel knew and understood that that villains are just more fun and more interesting. At the very bottom of the list, we have Twistor. Now, Twistor is just like a spinning top, stupid looking thing, and he's just like a little fat bulb of dumb. I don't know what to say. He just does not look threatening in any way, and therefore doesn't make a very good villain. Was he kind of fun, spin him around and have his weapons slashing at people? Yeah, I guess he was, but just silly looking, and therefore now not a fan. At the bottom of this list, we have one of the many versions of Skeletor. Now, one of the things that Mattel did pretty well is you got a bunch of different versions of He-Man and Skeletor. So if you missed the first one, you had a way of picking them up, and they all had really cool special features, except this one. This is Laser Power Skeletor. This is actually the last figure they produced. Laser Power Skeletor and Laser Power He-Man. Doesn't even really look like Skeletor. I don't know why they started going in a new direction. This is a figure that only came out in Italy. Apparently, Italians loved He-Man more than anyone else. So, I don't know what that's about. Next, we have Clawful. Basically, a lobster guy with a claw hand. We got our first Hordak on the list here. If Hordak is badass, Buzzsaw Hordak. You know, again, they're going to pump out these various versions of various characters. Did I need a Buzzsaw Hordak after I have another Hordak? I didn't. So, there he is. Rattler. Rattler was one of the Snake Men. Love all the Snake Men. Rattler may be my least favorite of the Snake Men, but even that is very cool. Blast Attack. And what's cool about Blast Attack is he has weapon feature was he blew up. So I don't know if he was sort of like a kamikaze, like he just goes into battle and explodes and kills everything around him. Kind of a cool feature. My big problem with that is that anytime you have that feature in a figure, it ultimately is going to explode every time you touch it. So you can't play rough with a figure like that. It's always going to fall apart. Number 36, we have Tongue Lash Ore, and this is one of the Snake Men. He's got a whipping tongue, right? The Snake Men in general were one of the many factions. I like that there's several factions of villains that He-Man has to face. You've got the Horde, you've got the Snake Men, and you've got Skeletor. Tongue Lash Ore was a pretty cool figure.
Tongue Lash Ore, whose evil tongue lashes.
Number 35, we have Multibot. Now, Multibot's kind of a cool idea, except it was already done, and his name is Modulak. And he's going to be high on this list because Modulak was awesome. So, the concept is you got a robot, and you can rip off his pieces and turn him into another whatever you want and customize your own figure and give him different weapons. And so that's kind of a cool idea. But again, already done with it, and when he did it before as Modulak, he was much cooler. Number 34, we have Dragstore. Terrible name. Terrible name. The reason his name is Dragstore is not because he's on RuPaul's Drag Race.
I'm not joking, bitch.
Is this bitch for real?
It is because he is a drag racer. So he does sort of transform poorly into a like little mini car thing. And that had a ripcord and he could fly off, which is sort of a cool feature, I guess. Let's face facts. Honestly, the hero list, about half of them were junk. The villain list, most of these are kind of cool, right? We gotta love most of these. So it's like, this is like, yeah, they're at the bottom of the list, but they're not the bottom because they suck. They're the bottom because this list is full of all kinds of awesome. Squeeze. Okay, Squeeze was a very cool figure with a very cool function of having very long, stretchy arms that you could use to constrict and crush. Overall, all the Snake Men work for me because there's an army of Snake Men that all have different powers, which totally fits in a Robert E. Howard terrifying Conan villains. So they really work. There's nothing silly about them. I don't like snakes. I like snakes about as much as Indiana Jones likes snakes. So for me, anything with snakes in it is scary and effective. Mantenna. Now Mantenna is the Horde's sort of silly laughing stock of the Horde. He was like he was sort of the comic relief character of the Horde. He had his 4 legs, although there really were only 2 legs in the figure. Does look really cool though. Okay, so he's not the greatest, doesn't have the greatest features or anything. He's kind of cool looking. Number 31, Whiplash. Whiplash.
They should call you Wimplash.
Just a lizard guy with a whip tail. He was also one of the goofier characters in the cartoon, but he worked pretty well as a monstrous villain that you would see in a sort of Robert E. Howard thing. So he fit the world well, which is nice. Next we have Cobra Khan. Now Cobra Khan was again a weird snake character that could spit water. It was always fun because he could spit water, which is always good to go and like fill him up and go spray your sister with the water coming from his mouth. But again, like unlike something like Snout Spout, which is spraying water and who cares, you could pretend the water was a poisonous, spray. And so he was a threat. He was frightening. And that's why I like Cobra Khan. Number 29, Web Store. What a stupid name. All I can think of a web store is, Emmanuel Lewis and this. Like, this is all I can think about.
Ooh, it was you, then came you. You made me leap with
So Webstore was cool looking, and he did have a really cool feature, and I do love the idea of a spider, race of people, and the fact that he could lower himself down on this, web, and you could imagine him having some really good powers, but just kept down by, again, a dumb name, which, is a recurring theme here. Kind of a stinker. Speaking of stinker is Stinkor. I'm going to say as a kid, yeah, okay. Stinkor was kind of cool. He just had a cool look, and I would just make him like fart and like kill everybody. But his power is to stink. His power is to stink. That's not a power, all right? Like, first of all, if I'm He-Man, I just plug my nose and kick him in the nuts. Like, you're done. Like, he's not gonna. What is that gonna do? How is he going to help Skeletor in his mission in any way? He just stinks bad, and he's a skunk, and it's a stupid idea. It's one of those things that, like, I still, as a figure, was he cool? He was cool, but he just does not work in the whole larger lore.
I smoke trouble! So not escape the evil smell of Stinkor. Now, He-Man!
Spikor. Now, Spikor is covered in spikes, and he's also got like a trident hand, and he can shoot beams out of it. To me, he looked more badass and scarier than a lot of these characters, and was given some weapons that made him pretty fun. Again, a dumb name. It's just a dumb name. Stop with the ors, please. Number 26. Okay, I'm putting this one kind of high, and that is Saurod. And I know he's from the movie, and therefore we all hate the characters from the movie. But what I love about Saurod is he's this sort of metallic looking thing that spits sparks. And you would inevitably just like burn your arm with Saurod on purpose, because your boy, that's what you do. And so you just sit there and just like spark your arm and just see if you can burn your flesh, which you could a little bit. We have Too Bad. Okay, Too Bad. I loved Too Bad in the cartoon. I feel like he was like one of the dumber characters, as far as like he was dumb, like he was physically dumb, and he was always like the figure was like one of those things where like he could punch himself in the face, which I think I made him do a lot. I think he did that in the cartoon, where he would argue with his two heads. That made him sort of fun. Okay, Blade. Now this guy is from the movie, and therefore would sit low because he is the movie sucks so hard. However, as just like objectively a figure that if you wanted a figure to fulfill that like Robert E. Howard villain, Blade works really well, and it gives two blades. You can wield them against He-Man, and makes for a pretty good villain. So despite coming from the crappy movie, I kind of like him. Number 23, we have Jitsu. All right. We got our first Asian character in the world of He-Man, and he is a metal karate chop. He's a metal karate chopping hand. And he just had a cool look. And he was sort of the opposite of Fisto, but he has a much better name, because he doesn't make me think of horrible sex acts when I think of Jitsu. And he's got a cool look. He kind of looks like the guy who played all of the villains, any Asian villain in any martial arts or every single action movie in the 80s. This guy would play him, which I appreciate because I love that guy. But, he was cool. Very cool. Big fan of Jitsu. Now we're getting to the really good ones. Leech. Now, Leech was so much fun because you could just stick Leech to your fridge or your mirror or whatever. But ultimately, Leech also works really well in this sort of creepy power that he could just suck out the energy of anybody. That's a pretty terrifying power. And he's not Leech Or. He's got a relatively non-stupid name. So there you go. Congratulations, Mattel.
And the sucking leech.
Number 21, Battle Armor Skeletor. You had a great feature where you hit his chest and it would swirl around and you would see battle damage. Number 20, cooler than Buzzsaw Hordak, was Hurricane Hordak. Hurricane Hordak was a part of incompatible with the He-Man version, where he could like hurl weapons, and he had weapons that would spin, and it was kind of a cool feature. Again, one Hordak is probably enough for me, and so that's why he's lower on the list. Triclops. Okay. Had a cool look, kind of worked for me, but ultimately has really dumb powers. He has 3 different eyes. He can see all around, okay, or he has 3 different ways of seeing. Number 18, Ninjor. All right. I mentioned this in the last. Lack of diversity in the He-Man Eternia world. They just have 1 black guy and 2 Asian stereotypes. That's basically it. And then everybody else is a white dude or a monster, I guess. I don't know. But Ninjor, I was a sucker for Ninjor because I was a sucker for ninjas. And as a lot of us were in the 80s. And maybe it makes no sense, but having a ninja in this line, it works pretty well if he didn't have such a stupid name. To have some ninjas and some sort of, Asian warriors makes a lot of sense in the Robert E. Howard version of He-Man. And he came with some good weapons and was fun. It was fun to play with. Back in the day when I thought ninjas were the most powerful thing you could be. I wanted to be a ninja. Everybody wanted to be a ninja. It was the 80s, okay? And I'm not a ninja, by the way. I did not do that. I went a different route. Ninja college was too expensive, and so I went to film school instead. But I still love ninjas. Maybe the scariest looking of all of the villains next to Snakeface, Scareglow. A creepy ghost that is a glow-in-the-dark skeleton. Scareglow looks awesome and therefore is high on the list, and I feel really does add a lot and fit well with the whole creepy mythology. Merman. Now Merman is from a race of mer people. He can command the creatures of the sea. He's more comfortable in a sea than land, and he was really one of the main villains and of Skeletor's crew, always arguing with Beastman. Merman had a great look and was a pretty great character. Definitely up there on the list. Grizzlord. Now Grizzlord gets a bad rep. I loved Grizzlord. Grizzlord just was a big furry ball. I love the look of Grizzlord. He's got a kind of charming face to him, right? Grizzlord. Part of the Horde again, and he almost works as sort of like the Horde's version of Beastman, although he's definitely not as ferocious or terrifying as Beastman. But he's just got a cool look, and he was fuzzy, and I remember liking the way he felt. So I'm putting him high on the list. Faker. Now you could say Faker is a dumb character because basically he's Blue He-Man, and he's a He-Man that is supposed to use to fool people into believing that he really is He-Man, but he's blue, so why would you do that? However, in the cartoon, he would turn blue at some point, I believe. Like he would fool you. He would look like He-Man, and then he would just like turn blue at some point. And then you could reveal underneath he would have like a computer, but it was like a wicked old style computer, the kind that has like the tapes, in it. And so that's kind of cool. I kind of love the Faker character, even though, Blue He-Man really maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I love that character. Now we have Dragon Blaster Skeletor. This is an awesome figure. He's got a dragon on his back that can just shoot stuff out. And again, you did want more, as Skeletor is this, master evil wizard. It was fun to have a bunch of different versions and a bunch of different weapons to really deck out your Skeletor and have him bring new powers into battle. So that to me, like really all of the versions of Skeletor really work for me as, adding to that power. And this was one of the cooler ones. Mosquitor, part of the Horde. Now Mosquitor is creepy looking as hell. If he's sitting there drinking human blood, that makes him absolutely terrifying.
Can He-Man survive the doors of doom?
No problem.
The problem is he might be drained by Mosquitor.
Snakeface. Now, I love Snakeface. He is creepy looking as hell. That is a terrifying looking figure. One of the scariest looking things in the Masters of the Universe world, and that's why I'm putting him kind of high here, just for that really creepy look. That shit will haunt your dreams, okay? And he's got like little snakes come out of his eyes, and he's absolutely terrifying. So He's not like that. He doesn't get a lot of love, but I think for me, he goes really high because he is just absolutely terrifying. Modulak. I love Modulak. I'm putting him really high on this list, maybe higher than most people would, because I just thought he was so much fun to play with.
As Hordak, I am
Modulak!
an evil horde all by myself with 1,000 battling bodies.
One, you could just build, the whole idea of Modulak is you've got this evil little creature and you can build his arms and put his body parts anywhere to make your own, which also meant that you could also cut off his limbs and rip off his limbs and rip them apart, which was what I was using for him all the time. But it just made him one of the most fun things and one of the most, I think the most innovative things that they did was to create Modulak. Number 9, I'm going to throw this one on there, even though I did not have this. Nobody had this unless you're a little Italian kid in 1987. You didn't have this. Mattel came out with Giants. Giants on the, as with everything in the Masters of the Universe, there was a good and a bad version. You had Battle Cat. If you had a Battle Cat, you had to have a Panther, right? If you had Zor, you had to have Screech, right? They had basically one of everything for the bad and the good. So of course they had a heroic giant, and then they also had this evil giant, Megator. Standing about 14, 15 inches, Megator would have been an awesome thing to have. He's actually absolutely terrifying looking, maybe the scariest thing in the Masters of the Universe line. He's got a big shock of dark black hair and a hideous face. He looks like the villains in the Time Machine. Would have loved to have had a giant to play with and have He-Man face off against, except it was only released in Italy, and this is at the very end of the line when Masters of the Universe was dying off, and therefore, you probably didn't have them. But awesome looking. The Horde Trooper. This is just something that was lacking from Masters of the Universe in general, was a sort of generic soldier type. I always think every line needs a soldier. You need soldiers because I was not the type to kill off main characters very often. For me, they were reserved for a beaten, and then I wanted like soldiers that I could absolutely just kill off and demolish. And I think He-Man needed that. The Horde Trooper finally gave us that. There were troopers, there were many of them, and you could kill them, and they did have a feature that you press the chest and they explode. But the Horde Trooper also looks cool. They have a very cool look to them that I think really works in a Stormtrooper-ish kind of way that's somewhat memorable. And so we needed more of those, and you could troop build. I think Mattel made a mistake in not having more things that you could troop build back then, because there were times you would buy 5 as a G.I. Joe fanatic. I would buy 3, 4 eels, 3, 4 snow serpents, vipers, and soldiers of all kinds, and a dozen bats. And I feel like I could have done the same with the Horde Trooper. Okay, now we're down to the very best. Number 7, we have Terror Claws Skeletor. This thing is awesome.
Universe have the most powerful weapon. It's Terror Claws Skeletor.
Of the Skeletors, he's just got this ferocious looking giant hands with giant claws on them. That again, I think anything that gives your Skeletor more power is, for me, it was more like I would just have Skeletor and then have all of the various versions of Skeletor's powers lying around that you could have him pull out. There would just be spells he would use in any given time, and that was very cool. And this is one of the better additions to Skeletor. King Hiss. I love King Hiss, the king of the snake people, and he would look like a snake man, but underneath his human facade would explode and fall off, and he would just be a gaggle of snakes. It's kind of nasty. And that makes for a very cool character, and also he's a competitor with Serpentor and Hordak, and so he was a whole other threat for He-Man. I like having these multiple factions that all would fight against He-Man. The Snake Men in general, I'm a fan of almost all of them. Number 5, Beastman. Now, Beastman was an awesome figure. One of the first and also one of the most badass looking. He could command the beasts. He had powers. He had this whip, and he was really strong and powerful, and stands out as one of the best characters. Also, cool name. Actually fits within the world of a Robert E. Howard. Fits as actually scary, actually threatening villain. And so Beastman is one of the best figures in the line. Number 4, we have Hordak. Now, Hordak is the sort of second version of the second Skeletor. A sort of reboot, a new villain for He-Man to face with his own group of people, the Horde. But I actually loved Hordak. I thought Hordak really looked cool. Some people call him a second-rate Skeletor, but I don't think he is. I think he's actually pretty badass. He's pretty terrifying looking.
Hordak and the evil Horde are out to get He-Man and Skeletor. Hordak.
And he also had some pretty cool features. He had that crossbow and he had the bat. And also he could transform. Sometimes in the cartoon he would transform. It was pretty goofy. He would become a car. He almost felt like a Wonder Twins. And that didn't make me love him. But if you get into him a little bit more, you'll realize that he is pretty evil. He stole She-Ra as a baby. So he steals babies. I think anybody who steals babies, that's pretty creepy. And, works for me. And he did work for me as a Robert E. Howard style villain in the creepier version of He-Man that was in my head. He really, and a lot of our heads, I should say, he really worked. He looked scary. He was scary. He steals babies. He is evil, and so I like Hordak. He also is the main one of the main antagonists in She-Ra. If you were a She-Ra fan, which I was, I didn't buy the figures, but I did watch the cartoon, and I appreciated the figures from afar. But I never got around to getting any. But I do like that he lives as a main villain there, or one of the main villains. Number 3, Evil Lyn. Now, what Evil Lyn is, I think it's a staple of 80s, action figure cartoons, that the only competent person is going to be a woman. I think it was like sort of the version of Girls Get It Done now, but maybe they felt bad. There's one woman, there's one woman to figure. Let's just make her actually competent, because I think that was one of the most annoying things about 80s action cartoons, is that the villains are always losers. They're always cowards. They're always incompetent. They're always whining. And then, of course, I would never play like that. For me, it takes the threat. To have villains that are like silly really takes the threat out of it, and the threat is what makes things fun. Is what brings stakes. So for me, they were all terrifying. Skeletor was an absolute sociopath, and he never ran away. He was scary as hell. And Evil Lyn was also scary. And she's always scheming and planning, sort of like Starscream. She wants power, but she was a very cool character. I'm also all good for bad girls, as you may know. And she was, who doesn't want a hot witch action figure? Back in the day, we were pressed. It was wrong. I maybe played a little too late. Okay, I maybe played during puberty. Okay, I'm admitting too much here. She's kind of hot. All right, that's what I'm saying. Evil Lyn's hot. Okay. Number 2, we have Trapjaw. Such a cool character. I would have him bite people's limbs off and just chew on flesh, but he also had these arms that would have detachable weapons, and you could modify his weapons, and in the cartoon he would have different features, and he's pretty evil. He's pretty evil in some incarnations of the cartoon. Very cool looking character, and one of the tougher villains. Last guy, of course. I'd like to be more creative and tell you that there's something better than Skeletor, but there isn't. Skeletor is the greatest villain in Masters of the Universe. Of course, I remember, like I said, seeing that and walking into the store and just seeing that creepy face. I also loved his weapon, his staff with the ram head, and his mission that to take over Castle Grayskull so he could use a portal and bring his minions over to this dimension and become master of the universe. That gave direction to the story, which was really interesting and a good strategy, I think, for anything like this. So I love Skeletor. So that is my list of all of the villains in the entire line of Masters of the Universe. Let me know your list below. Who would you rank higher? Who would you rank lower? I'm probably pretty sure that most of you are going to have Skeletor at the top, right? And let me know also what other, big 80s action figure franchises you would like to see a ranking of. And you can check out some more of my rankings right here.